Welcome back. So as we mentioned earlier, just before we went on the break, Equal Education calling a victory the High Court of South Africa's order that the Department of Basic Education and Provincial Education departments develop a new plan to feed the over 9 million learners that depend on the National School Nutrition Program. This even when schools are closed because of COVID-19 or learners are at home because of rotating timetables. To speak now a little bit more from the perspective of the National Department of Basic Education, we speak to its spokesperson, Mhlanga. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So you were listening in on part of the conversation with Equal Education, saying that if they have to be forced to take the litigious route to keep you to what you're supposed to do, they will do that. But talk to us what you have found challenging in the past and whether you will be able to meet the new court order.
Good evening, Tsepi. So, well, the first thing that we need to clarify is that this is a settlement, which means both parties sat down and discussed, and both parties understood the complexities of the task itself of having to feed children who are not in school. The school nutrition program was designed to be a school-based nutrition program. When COVID-19 happened last year, there was a lockdown which restricted movement of people in the country. As a result of that, we were not able to continue to deliver education services, including support services, such as the school nutrition program. That's when they went to court to try force the department to feed learners who were not in school during the lockdown. And they were successful in that regard. And the department then complied with the court order and went out to find learners where they were, and basically the department doing something that they had not been able to do before in the history of the school nutrition program. That is to try feed children outside school premises. But that meant that we needed to be innovative in what we were doing. One of the innovations meant that we needed to relax the regulations that govern the management of the school nutrition program, to say to a child that you do not necessarily need to go to a school where you learn, but you can go to any school to access your meal. But some provinces also went out to prepare food parcels which were given to children. We also arranged free transport for learners to be able to go to schools to collect their meals. But the turnout in almost all those cases was very low, because even with the learners and their parents, we were asking them to do something that they had not done before. They were used to an approach where you come to school to learn, and while you're there, you also get to access your meal. But now we're saying to them, go to school to collect your meal and go home. Okay. It happened to a larger, but it was not something that we're all used to doing. So the numbers were not that great, but we're able to do what we could.
I must jump in here, Mr. Mhlanga. One of the things that Equal Education in Section 27 had said repeatedly was that provinces, districts were not submitting reports on how the feeding scheme or plan is working out in terms of the rollout, including which learners are receiving, and that some were excluded. So how are you going to improve on this? Because I believe that the revised plans must be filed with the parties that approach the courts within 1 month, and that those monthly reports must be filed describing the implementation of the revised plans.
Yeah, that's a very good question, because what it then does is to ask us to say, what is the focus area of this revised settlement now, or this revised court order now? The focus of it is basically the reporting requirements which the organizations are calling for, not that the job itself is not being done. The work is being done, learners are being fed. Their complaint was that they were not getting the reports as the court order had required, which also was something that the provinces were working on. You also have a situation where the very people who are supposed to compile the reports are the same ones who must make sure that in every school, all the learners that are deserving, those that benefit from the school nutrition program, continue to benefit from that. But every 2 weeks reporting to the court. That proved to be a very difficult task because the focus was to make sure that the learners get their meals. So there is agreement in that regard that some work is being done. So what they want to see now is the work on paper, how you are doing it and what plans you have in place to address the challenges that exist.
Okay.
And that is going to be done.
So, Mr. Mhlanga, one of the things that these organizations were lamenting, contrary to what you're saying, that all learners were being fed, was that not all learners were being fed because there was lack of communication, including where centers were open, where schools were not open, to indicate that the feeding scheme is operating from there or children can be fed from there. So how are you going to improve that, your communications?
Well, to simply attribute the low turnout of people to access their meals in school to communication, that is also erroneous. Remember, we also have COVID around us, which means families have moved from their places, they have been displaced, and if you remember, 2 weeks ago, there's a report that indicated that some additional 500,000 learners have dropped out of the education system, and some of those learners are those that benefit from the school nutrition program. By the time we reopened schools this year, there was another research which said that 1.5 million children had gone missing from the education system as a direct result of COVID-19. So it's a whole host of challenges that we are facing as a system. That's why, among others, we call on schools to be opened in full so that we are able to proceed with the work that we have been doing of providing education, but also delivering other support services such as the school nutrition program. Yes, communication could be an issue, but it's not the only one. And I'm glad, in fact, we are very happy that they will be playing their part to communicate, because now they will be doing a bit of the work that we had been doing as a sector. Every province last year, even this year, actually went out to communicate, to say to communities, please note that schools are open for the feeding program to proceed. Come get your meals, come collect food parcels. To a large extent, that took place. We've got images to prove that indeed people came through. But it's not all the 9 million children. And that's another point that we need to remember, that while feeding, we must also be careful not to create gatherings that will be super spreaders of the coronavirus, because we are also fighting COVID-19 as well. So everything that we do, we need to do it responsibly while doing our best to meet our obligations, whether it's a court order, whether it's programmatic work that the department had sought to do in each financial year in terms of its annual plan.
Thank you so much for speaking to us, Elijah Mhlanga, spokesperson for the Department of Basic Education.